Hey guys, it's Sam, and today I'm going to be tier ranking all of the series finales that I've read, with a few caveats. This video was voted on by my bibliothecary supporters. Every month my bibliothecary supporters get to vote in a poll for books that I'll read, video topics that I'll do. We have tarot card readings, we have live shows that are exclusive every month, there's a Discord. There's a lot of stuff, that's not even all of it. So if you are interested in contributing to my content in that way, I will leave the link for that on the screen. But as I said, this is most of the series finales that I have read. I'm tier ranking them. I have 33. What I didn't include was any kind of companion series where like each book sort of stands alone. That I don't really think there's a series finale in that case. And also duologies, because for me, a lot of times duologies feel like one complete story in two chunks. So again, that doesn't really feel like a finale to me. So there are 33 books on this list. I think my spreadsheet says that I finished like 42 series, so the rest of those are the companion ones. But I think 33 will be enough for you guys. So let's get into it. Okay, these also aren't really in any particular order as far as when I read them or anything, so let's go. I have these in the normal tier ranking order of God tier being just, you know what it is, God tier, great, good, meh, and shit. So the first is Emerald Green by Kirsten Gier. This is one that I read a while ago, and I would say shit. Now, this is a series that was translated from German, and back when I read it, a lot of people were like, oh my god, the German version is so great, like it's a German sort of like classic YA novel at this point. But the relationship was very insta-lovey, like in the translation, and just a lot of things seemed to not really translate well. So I don't even remember the content of the plot, to be honest. I just remember being pissed off at this series. Next is Amnesty by Laura Elena Donnelly, and this is a adult sort of like noir punk kind of story. Very sort of tragic, I would say. Probably between good and great. I would say great. I think the second book in the series is a little bit more like good. But this is a darker story for sure. Very gay, but very dark. And just a lot about like tumbling of regimes and politics and just a lot of messy stuff in there. But overall, really enjoyed the series. Then we had Dark Dawn by Jay Kristoff. Ooh man. This is a pretty good finale for me. I would say between God tier and great, honestly. So I am gonna put it in God tier. I do think that I prefer the second book a little bit better, God's Grave. But overall, I really enjoyed this series and the way that this was done. And I would say this goes between God tier and great. Like there were some God tiers that are definitely above this God tier one, but still like one of the best finales that I've ever read. I believe the name of this, because I can't see it right now, is Still Human by Sylvain Novelle. This is the third book in the Themis Files, which is an adult science fiction first contact story. I don't remember a lot about this. I want to say it was probably, I can't remember if this one was more meh or good, but I'll just put it in meh because I don't remember anything about it. I think that I might have disliked the second book slightly more than the third book. I do feel like the third book like wrapped some things up a little bit, but again, that series left my brain as soon as I read it. It was like very fun for me when I read it, but then it was gone. Into the Still Blue by Veronica Rossi. This is the third book in the, I just forgot the name of it. My brain wants to say Nevernight, and that is not true. And I don't own them anymore, so I can't just look. Nevernight, no. I forget what it's called. But this is the final book in a YA dystopian. This was back when dystopians were very popular when I first got into BookTube. This is actually pretty good. I would say probably good more than great, although it honestly might be great. But it's just been so long since I've read it that like current me cannot judge it appropriately anymore. But I do think what I really liked about it, I think this might be between like good and great, but what I did really like about it was everything like wrapped up pretty nicely. The characters remain consistent throughout the whole series, which doesn't always happen in those like classic YA dystopians that were popular about 10 years ago. And the couple was like real strong, like stayed strong the whole time, which I really dug. Ooh, Ignite Me by Tahara Mafi. So I put this in here even though, yes, the Shatter Me series has continued into what now like a 6-book series. I only read it as a trilogy. I continue to feel that Ignite Me is the finale of the first trilogy and that there's like basically a second trilogy. I'm not gonna read the rest of the series. I don't care. This is the finale for this trilogy for me. this was so elite to me back in the day, but I do think it's gonna go in great and not God. There are things now that I've read that are like very much God tier. However, I read this in 2 days, possibly like 2 sittings, and it was intoxicating to me at the time. Part of me wants to go back and reread the Shatter Me series. I've mentioned this a few times. I just don't think it's gonna have that same luster. It's one of the few series that I've read that I really enjoyed at the time of reading it, even though it had its faults. And I don't think it's gonna have the kick that I want it to anymore. So I just kind of want to leave it where it is on the nostalgia shelf. I've gotten rid of the books anyway, so I just want to leave it where it is in my heart. The Goddess Inheritance by Amy Carter. This was a Hades Persephone retelling, although it's not quite Hades Persephone because Persephone is still an actual character and it's not our characters. She's basically becoming like the replacement for Persephone. I loved this first book for what it was back at the time, but then as the series went on, I feel like this one was probably like more meh. I could not tell you, again, the plot of this. I don't necessarily think it was pure garbage, but this series, it's a good thing that I read this series early on in my booktube career before I read way better things, because I ranked it a little more highly than I probably would have. Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. What a polarizing book. I am putting it in great. It's probably between good and great, but I do really like the finale. I do, and I think that's just because the Grisha trilogy is just like so wonderful to me. But I don't like the very, very end of this. It's very much how I feel about Mass Effect 3. If Mass Effect 3 was on here, even though Mass Effect 3 is a video game, I would feel very similarly. I love Mass Effect 3, the game, but the end, not so great. Same thing with this. Like, this book, for the most part, is so good, and then the end happens, and you're like, fuck. So that's why I would go, like, between good and great. We have Of Neptune by, who's this even by? I'm forgetting. It's book 3 in the Serena Legacy. Cameo again. This is a cheesy YA, like paranormal, because it's mermaids. So it's coming out right around the time of like the post-Twilight and all that, when all these authors are coming out with like alien and mermaid romances. This is hot garbage. This is not good. The first book was like fun enough for what it was. Like, if you wanted sort of a nostalgic, like the same feelings you got when you read Twilight for the first time kind of vibes, sure, fine. But it didn't need to be a trilogy, like, at all. And the main conflict just like kept repeating. No. It's not good. The Bitter Kingdom by Ray Carson. This is the 3rd book in the Girl of Fire and Thorns series. I really like this finale. I think it's probably gonna go in great and not God tier, but this series is really good. This is another series that I wouldn't mind rereading. Maybe that'll be like my 2022 thing. Like, I'll just start rereading like old favorites, because I never do that. You know I never do that. But I do think that this series would hold up. The way that everything kind of like concludes, the love story culmination in this one, it's not a romance series, but the slow burn in this is real good. So I would say this goes in great. Winter by Marissa Meyer. This is gonna go in meh. The Lunar Chronicles I've talked about before is a series that like I had such fun when I was reading them, and then as soon as I finish reading them, they're immediately out of my brain, and that's pretty much how this is. But I do remember Winter just being just kind of lackluster. Not a lot of sort of things that felt like they were high stakes, you know, for a series that's been going on for so long. I just didn't really feel like any of the characters were in any kind of danger, and we didn't really have a lot of time for like Winter, and then whoever the new was his name, Jace, but her like story, like there's just too many characters at that point, too much going on. It got really messy, in my opinion. The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin, God tier. Obviously. Oh my god. This is just, the series as a whole is amazing, but I remember this like is such a moving, emotional finale, and like just like the themes and how everything sort of wraps up, and the character growth that we have with the characters, and like the arcs they go through, and just like, is it rough on the heart? Yes. But that's almost what makes it God tier, you know? Dreams of Gods and Monsters by Laini Taylor. I do think this series went just like downhill by the time we got to Dreams of Gods and Monsters. Honestly, it's probably between like good and meh. I don't think it's as bad enough to go on meh, but like it's good meh, you know. It's fine. It's fine is what it is. I love the first book in that series, and every book got sort of like progressively worse for me. They're not necessarily like bad or badly written. I mean, they're obviously not badly written, but just like I cared less. And this book just didn't necessarily feel like a conclusion. I feel like she left the doors open for more stuff there, but then she hasn't done anything with it yet. And it didn't feel like an ending. There was a lot of things that like weren't resolved or like we didn't learn about and we never got answers for, and that just feels really unsatisfying. I'm really good with a vague ending, generally speaking, but not vague in the way that she did this. Ugh, Obsidia by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. Shit. Garbage. Garbage can. No. Illuminae was so good. Illuminae was so good and like so unique and so fun, and then they beat that concept over the head like a dead horse. They just repeated the same story plots over and over and over again. The characters got more and more two-dimensional, and like they're supposed to be teens, and it's very much like, it very much feels like adults writing teens. Oh my god, it was just, Obsidia was bad. Because they pulled the same exact shit with us over and over and over again. It's like, we've seen this twist before. You can't fool me again. Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. That's gonna go on meh. It's a shame because the second book in the series, like for many people, I really enjoy. It's not as bad as ACOTAR was for me. Like ACOTAR was a 2-star, this one was a 3-star, and ACOMAF was a 5. But it's still very just like bleh. Like I couldn't even tell you really a ton that happens in it, to be quite fair. If I read like a recap, I would be like back in it and be like, okay, you know, nothing super complicated happens in these books, but it just was more of a letdown. It just kind of. Then we have A Porson by Garth Nix. This is the 3rd book in the A Porson series. This is one that I really, truly want to reread. Okay, I know I say this a lot, but I wish I could read it in October, but I have stuff coming up in October and I will tell you guys about it later. So I don't think I'll have the time to reread anything, but I do think this is probably good, if not great, honestly. When I first read this series, it's really almost, they're not companions, but the first book is Sabriel, and that follows one character, and then the second and third book, Lyriel and A Porson, follow a different character, Lyriel. So I loved Sabriel so much. I've actually reread that book twice, but the character Sabriel I adore, and so when I read this in high school, that's how long ago it's been, I was a little bit upset about like not continuing to follow Sabriel. So I don't think I could judge this accurately based on my first reading, which is why I want to reread it. And it's also about like all my favorite themes of like between life and death and characters that have to bind dead things, and it's just like very good and very like fall spooky. A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. Oh my god, this would almost go between God and great, and I'm gonna put it in great actually, because the rest of the series is not good. But for some reason she nailed this finale. Like it's just, what? Like I hated the second book of the series. The first book was like fine, the second book I hated, suffered through, and then the third book I read, and this was all because we were reading it for the BookTube SFF Awards. That's the only reason I read them. I don't hate read things. And this finale like wrapped everything up really nicely, like was just really good. Really good. And I was very shocked by that. I was very shocked. I think because we almost follow some of the other characters that I like more than Lila Bard a little bit more in this one. It makes it better. I don't know what it was, but it's good. Immortal Rain by Morgan Rhodes. Shit. No one can hate on a series quite like those that used to love it. This could go between meh and shit, but I'm so mad at the series that I will be in shit. This series just tanked. Just went so downhill. And not that it was ever the best series of all time. It's a 6-book YA fantasy series. But I really loved it. It was beautiful to me. And it's tied to a lot of things because that's how I made a lot of friends on BookTube originally. Like a lot of my friends I still have, we came together because of the love of the series. Like, it's important to me in that way. But the last 2 books in the series, hot garbage. This wasn't as bad as the 5th book in the series, but considering that the 3rd and the 4th book in the series are so good for what they are, and then it just like loses itself and like just poorly written at that point. And this is going in shit. The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater. I would say this isn't good. This series sort of meanders and loses its way a lot. It's not supposed to be a plot-driven series, but there really should be some like conclusive plot tie-up type things that didn't happen in this series just because Maggie gets lost in atmosphere and character stuff. So this wasn't as like monumental as I thought it was going to be. Actually, the 2nd book in the series remains my favorite, but it's fine. It's fine. I mean, I couldn't tell you a ton about what happens in it. Again, one of those kind of situations. It's been a while since I read it. I think I was still in grad school and I was reading it, so my brain from that time, very mushy. Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare. This would go between great and God. Part of me wants to put it in God just because like the relationship stuff is God tier in this, okay? I only read this series because of the relationship stuff. To me, that couple is a throuple. You can't argue with me. And the way that that like love triangle was done was so good, like was God tier good. It's God tier good. The plot though, and this is true of like most Cassie Clare books, the plot and like the villain, no, not good. So that's why she can't be in God tier, okay? Because like, no, she doesn't compare to these other ones. But for what it was it a really great finale? Yes. And this is pretty much why I read that whole series. Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. I'm gonna say God. This is one of my favorite finales. This whole series I really enjoy, but like the way that this wrapped up, again, similar to The Stone Sky, and that like thematically, the way that everything really comes together, and it's more about like the themes and stuff than necessarily even characters, although some of the character stuff that happened was great. Like it really comes together well, and I think that whole series is real good. The Beauty of Darkness by Mary E. Pearson. I think this would be actually great. There's way more good finales in here than I thought there were going to be, actually. I would say great. I really enjoyed this finale. Again, not God tier. It might be between like good and great. Maybe it's good. I'm trying to remember what even happened in it. No, it's great. The way that this finale sort of like wraps up, I really enjoy like this series again as a whole, and this finale remains one of my favorites. I can't exactly tell you why, obviously. My brain has kind of forgotten things about the plot, but we're going off of feels more than anything else. The Magician's Land by Lev Grossman. This is between God and great. I'm actually going to put it in God, I think, because the way that the series went, The Magician's Land is so tied to the first book, The Magicians, and I hated the first book, but I was told by everyone that likes the series, you have to get past the first book, but the first book is important. But even though I didn't like it. The character growth of all the characters, the way that things tie back to what happened in the first book, like so well, just, ooh, amazing. Just like some of the foreshadowing, the connections there, perfect. Again, Quentin as a main character is a douche, but he suffers so much, like that the narrative corrects his douchiness. Like, hey, he shouldn't do this shit, right? He doesn't get away with stuff. So I really like that. Like, just everything felt correct. The Winter's Kiss by Mary E. Pearson. This is the third and final book in the Winter's trilogy. This one was just fine. This one was just like good to meh, I would say. I read this in like one day. I was so excited for it. The Winter's Crime is my favorite book in the series. It's like so good, but I also like The Winter's Curse. But this just like left me disappointed. It wasn't what I wanted. I could no longer really tell you what I would want, but it wasn't what I wanted. Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. Probably between like good and meh. I mean, I don't hate it as much as most people do. I would probably say it's like good. It's fine. It's fine. So this one was more of a disappointment. Again, I liked the second book. With a lot of these that are good, I like the second book so much more. But it was okay. It was fine. I mean, the plot stuff that happened with Carden was stupid. And then things get resolved like really quickly. So it was fine. It was good to meh. Mockingjay by Suzanne Clark. It's been so long since I've actually read this, so I'm kind of getting like mixed up between like the book and the movie. I would say this is probably good. I mean, in our hearts, we were all so mad at it when it first came out and with everything that happened, but I actually think that like beyond the very, very end, and how everything wraps up, because I don't think that is like completely what I would have seen for it. I think like Scars of War, you know what I mean? I think it's pretty good about that stuff. The Fallen Kingdom by Elizabeth May. This is the last book in the Falconer trilogy. I believe I read this book like this year, maybe like end of last year, and I could not remember like what it's about. Would I put it in shit or meh? I want to say it was like a 2-star. I'll probably put it in like meh, because like shit I feel like I would feel more passionately about. But this series was just very like mediocre to me, unfortunately. Did not get the hype of that one. Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. This is the last book in the Farseer trilogy. This was very meandery, but I would still say it's good, but it meanders so much, and I was warned about that before I went into it, which is why it took me so long to read it. But yeah, it meanders a lot, but there's like still some things that are important that happen in it. The characters suffer a ton. And will continue to. I need to keep reading the books in the series. The overarching Realm of the Elderlings series. Maybe that'll be also a 2022 goal. We're getting to the end of 2021, so I can't say it's gonna happen this year because it probably won't. But yeah, it still set up some things for like the world that I think are interesting. Look who we have here. The Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden. Fucking god tier. This is the top of the top. The top tier god tier, okay? Never have I read a better finale, and never will I probably. So good. It's good on its own, and it's good, I mean, you can't read it on its own, but like as it's, you know, its own sort of story separate from everything else. Amazing, beautiful, brilliant. But also the character arcs, both in that book and all the books leading up to it, and just the overarching story and how everything goes. Perfect. Flawless. Not a single thing I would change. This is a book I will reread because it's just perfection in a book. A Sorrow Fierce and Falling by Jessica Cluess. This is, I would actually say this is kind of like good, between good and meh. This series could have been so much better than it was. It had so much like promise. The first couple of books were just like really fun and interesting, and like the magic and everything was cool, but honestly it should have been a 4-book series because too much was crammed into this last book. That actually all the things that happen make sense and are good. They just happen too quickly, back to back to back to back. If we would have had time and this would have been a 4-book series, this would have been great. This would have been like an excellent finale, I'm sure, because everything that got set up was so good. We just didn't have time to sit with any of it. The Fate of the Tierling by Erica Johansson. I would say this is probably between good and great, but I'm probably gonna say good. I know a lot of people don't like this one, it's a little bit polarizing, but I think it's good, fine, whatever, but the first book in the series remains my favorite because of the different twists and turns the series takes overall that are very unexpected and that you can't really talk about because that would be spoiler territory, but ultimately like interesting. A very interesting series, so a good finale. Ancillary Mercy by Ann Leckie. This series is tough because it's a science fiction series, adult science fiction series, much more about like character connections than anything else. I was expecting a much grander scope when I went into it, so I would say this is like good. Not great for me personally. I mean, this whole thing is subjective, obviously, but fine. The series is well written and I enjoyed it, but like the finale does not stand out to me. Again, I have vague just flashes of sort of what happened in that and like nothing else. And lastly, ending on a like meh note, but we have The Warrior Moon by Kate Arsenault Rivera. This would go in meh. As you guys know, this is the last book in Their Bright Ascendancy series. The first book, The Tiger's Daughter, I loved, and then the second book was garbage, and then the third book was like kind of fine. Like it was just kind of okay, you know? Which is a shame because I did really enjoy that first book and there was so much more potential and we just didn't get to see any of that, which is disappointing. But you guys know that when I have a tier ranking, I love a good bell curve, and that's what she is. She's a bell curve. Actually, it looks kind of like it's flicking you off, which that's also fine. But yeah, I do enjoy a nice bell curve that always feels correct. So of all of the 40 something series that I've read, I know I couldn't put all of them on there, but I don't really think any other of the companion series that I didn't include in here would have had god tier finales. Only 5 god tier finales, 6 in the great, most in the good, meh, and shit. But thankfully not as much shit as I thought. I went through a period of time where I was very mad at YA finales, and I think that's because I always want them to be great and god tier, and they frequently aren't. So that is what I run into. But as you can see, and I am not shocked, all of the god tier books are adult finales. I do think adult fantasy, especially finales, that's what all these are, do the finales better. The YA books frequently just miss the mark or very much miss the mark. But that is it for all of my series finales and how I would rank them. So comment below, let me know about some of your god tier finales, or if any of these you would put in different categories. I'd love to know your opinions. But thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.